Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doin Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to the show, y'all. A lot of people in prison have mental issues, like depression, paranoia, PTSD, those types of things, right? But there are that small few, very small few that are sociopaths, psychopathic individuals, right? Now, we still have to live with them. It's not like they take people like that and separate them from everybody else. It is what it is when you're in the penitentiary. Everybody has to mingle. If they qualify to be in the general population, they're going to be in the general population. Will they have access to help here and there? Depends on what prison they're in, if they get some help, right? But here's the thing. More people than you realize are sociopaths, man. Psychos, right? A lot of them. But you don't see that until it's too late. And that's what this story is about. This story is about this guy named Tony, right? Tony was a sociopath. He was a sociopath. And he had this job where he was like a commercial cleaner. And a commercial cleaner in the penitentiary, we call him a rock man, right? A rock man, they sweep, mop, buff the floor, keep it waxed, keep it clean, empty the trash, do all of those things like what a janitor does. They do all of those different types of jobs. And the building that Tony was in, it allowed him to be around a lot of the people that run the prison. Now, look, keep in mind, they know everything about him, right? They know everything about him. They know what his mental issues are and all of this and that, right? And they still allowed him to have a job in an area where people that worked at the facility would have to interact with him every day. Now, some can make the argument that that's a good thing. A lot of other people would say that's not a good thing, right? But anyway, Tony was around a lot of people, particularly females, y'all. And these women, they're nurturing, caring, you know what I'm saying? And some men are the same way, no big thing, you know what I mean? They would, every now and then, be in the break room and having their lunch or whatever the case may be. And if they didn't eat it all, they would leave it for Tony. They would just leave it on the table. It's not like they told him that he could have it. After that first time saying, get rid of that, and they wink at him, he understood what that meant when they left their unfinished plate on the table. And he ate all kinds of stuff. Chicken, steak, turkey, whatever they had, and they left it, he would finish that plate. Now, don't get it twisted. They wouldn't bite off the chicken and not finish the chicken and leave that for him. They'll leave him a piece of chicken that's not been touched, but they may have eaten some of the potatoes or the potato wedges or the corn or the macaroni and cheese and stuff like that, right? He didn't mind that, because I'm telling you, it's hard in here to get a decent meal. So if you find yourself having to eat a meal that somebody else may have put their fork in the potatoes and all, no big deal. Keep it moving, right? I know that you might think of that as gross out there, but, let your stomach start growling and then holler at me. You feel me? But here's the thing. See, all of these things that they would do for Tony, in his mind, they meant way more than what it actually meant to them. They were just being nice to him. They wanted him to feel like, look, you're part of the team. We're going to treat you nice as long as you do your job and obey the rules and stuff like that, right? But he took it to another level. And he started to, it's almost like an animal that imprints onto another animal, right? Tony would claim some of these women as his. Now, they didn't know it, but he he conducted himself as if he was in a relationship with them. They didn't know it. They never given him any indication that that was the case, but that's what his mind was like. Now, he had a girlfriend. Yeah, he had a girlfriend. With all the issues he had going on up here, he had a girlfriend. And she was crazy about him. She came to visit him every weekend. They ate good in the VG. They snuggled and all this, what they could get away with. And he talked to her on the phone at night. So it wasn't like he didn't have somebody in his life. And he really cared for her. Really cared for her. But see, he had this side of him that was dark. Real dark. And a lot of people surmised that the reason that he was like that was because of his case. See, his case involved the death of a child. It involved the death of a child. And he pretended that nobody knew, but everybody knew. But when he talked about his case, some people in here do that from time to time with people that they get close with, or you just find yourself in a situation and you say, well, on my case, this and that happened or whatever. But he had people believing that he had a murder charge that had nothing to do with what the real issues of his case were. And a lot of people in here do that because they become embarrassed or ashamed of whatever the case is and whatever part of the case that they don't want nobody to know. Because one thing that you don't want people to know about you in the penitentiary is that you killed a child or you hurt a child in some kind of way, right? Because it's hard for people to accept that. Now, look, don't get it twisted. Ain't none of it right. None of the stuff that goes on that puts people in prison right. But see, that is frowned upon in a way that a lot of people are afraid to let other people know. Now, in his situation, he pretended that it didn't happen. And most people, because of his mental issues, they just left him alone. But see, a part of him, he couldn't let it go himself. And that dark side of him, that dark side that he had in him, made him see everybody. Even though he pretended in his mind that they didn't know it, he had planted a different narrative in their mind. In his heart, I believe that he knew that everybody knew. And the reason I say that is because of the way he conducted himself around people that worked with him. It was this guy named Chris that started working with him. Day one, Tony had a problem with him. And this dude didn't do anything to Tony. He didn't do anything to make Tony, to give Tony any reason or right to mistreat him. He just didn't want Chris to be looked upon favorably like he was, because he thought in his mind that if they like Chris, then they're going to start treating me how I think I deserve to be treated because I killed a child. So he would do anything to prevent that from happening. Now, Chris had no idea how devious and manipulative Tony was. So Tony befriended Chris. Befriended him, told him everything. Look, we're going to work together, we're going to do this together, and break bread together and all of these different types of things. And if you need anything, let me know. Because Tony knew people around the penitentiary and all this and that. And Chris was interested in getting a cell phone. Hold up. Wait a minute. Now, we're not allowed to have cell phones in the penitentiary, y'all. It's against the rules. And if they catch you with it, they're going to pop you down. Just like you going to the hole, you're going to do some hole time. You have to pay a fine and all that old kind of stuff, right? Yeah, real penitentiary stuff. So Tony, being the dark, devious person that he is, he convinced Chris that he could hook him up. And he got Chris a phone. But see, when Chris got the phone, this wasn't his first rodeo. He had been in other prisons, right? So when he got the phone, he made sure that nobody, not even Tony, knew when he used it or where it was hidden at, because he didn't want anybody to have any leverage over him. And that's a powerful thing in here. So look here, check this out. Chris hid the phone in the work area, right? He would prefer not to get caught with it in the room versus in a common area where he works, because he could say it's not mine. The only way they could prove that it belonged to him if they were able to pop it, open it up, right? So he always made sure that it stayed locked when he had it put up, and then he only got it out on certain days. But see, that's the plan when you have a phone. You say, I'm going to keep it, I'm going to only use it, you know what I'm saying, on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. That's always the plan when you start out. And you stick to it. And plus, on top of that, you get on the pay phone so you keep your routine. You keep your routine of using the phone, and then you got your phone, your cell phone, and then you're in the cell all the time. And then what happens is you start to make contact with all of the old people out there on the streets. And next thing you know, you hear somebody, you know what I'm saying, that you hadn't heard from in a while, and they say, man, can you call me back on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday? One of those days that you don't have the phone out. And at first you say, man, I don't keep the phone out like that. And then over time, something always happens. And it usually involves taking care of some business, getting some money, where you break your own rules, or some female comes into play. And that's what happened to Chris. He made contact with an old flame. And once he made contact with her and they would talk on the Fridays and the Saturdays and the Sundays, she was digging him. And she said, I wish we could talk more. I wish we could talk more often, you know. And he broke his own rules. He decided that, okay, I'll bring it out for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then it was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And he would be more careless in putting it up and getting it out and all this and that, because what he didn't understand is that Tony, the darkness that was in him, was watching. He was watching Chris. He was trying to figure out. He knew he had a phone because he helped him get it. He was trying to figure out where it was. But so he could tell the po-po when to get him. Because he wanted Chris out the area. Now let me explain something to y'all. Certain jobs in here they call skilled jobs, and some jobs they called unskilled, right? The job that Chris had was unskilled. Now, why is that important? Well, if you have a skilled job, meaning you get paid 50 cents an hour and it calls for some kind of special skill that you might have, like a barber job is a skilled job, landscaping is a skilled job. They want you to know a little bit about these things. You know what I'm saying? A cook in the kitchen is a skilled job, but the rock man job is not a skilled job. But in this area where Chris and Tony worked, they didn't want people in this area that would break the rules, so to speak. So this is what happened. And this is why that's important to mention. When you have an unskilled job and you get in some trouble, 9 times out of 10, you'll get to keep your job. It just depends on the circumstances. But it's a no-no when it comes to those phones. If you get caught with a phone, you're going to the kitchen and work in pots and pans and work your way back up and what they say, earn their trust again. You understand? So here's what happened. Chris has got the phone out on a Thursday. Right? On a Thursday. All of a sudden he hears a knock at his door, at the cell door. And before he could say come in, Tony had opened the door and reached in his cell and said, here you go. Got a couple of burritos for you, bro. And when he handed him the burrito, Chris looked at him like, what? I mean, you know, because he hadn't given him any food to put in on it or whatever the case may be. But when he handed those burritos to Chris, he noticed that Tony was stretching his neck. And y'all know what I'm talking about when I say stretching his neck. He's eyeballing the cell real fast so he can see that phone. And guess what? He saw the light shining on that phone. Gotcha. Gotcha. Next thing you know, Chris is starting to think, well, maybe, nah, he ain't gonna say nothing. We work together. We cool. We kick it. You know what I mean? 2 days later, the rumors start floating around the compound. Shakedown crew coming, y'all. They coming. So now, Tony and Chris, the area that they work in, they can find out things. You know, you get like a fly on the wall, right? So they're trying to listen, right? Tony already knew the answer. They were coming. And his whole intention that day was to make sure Chris believed that they were not coming. It wasn't going to be no shakedown. That's just rumor mill, right? Yeah, so Chris is convinced now because Tony said it. He don't think that Tony is as dark in his heart as he really is. He has no reason to believe that because Tony is a chameleon. He knows how to make it look real nice, y'all. I'm telling you, like real nice. So check this out. This is what happened. They hit the door. Boom. Stand up. They tell Chris to get up. Tell his cellie to get up. 3 of them. They pat him down and they put him outside the cell, standing up on the wall, facing the wall, nose on the wall. Don't move, hands behind your back. Don't move. Now, this is not the only cell that they hit. You got other officers shaking down the other cell, so he's starting to think, wait a minute. I thought they weren't coming. The phone is in there. And it's locked though, but it's in there. They find it. They call Chris and his cellie back into the cell and they say, whose is this? See, they do that because they want somebody to claim the phone. If nobody claims the phone, both individuals in the cell got to wear it. Chris being the type of guy that he is, he said, that's mine, officer. So they said, where's the charger? And he tells them where the charger is. So they get the charger and the phone. They exit the phone. They exit the cell. They take his ID card. They say, look here, go on back in. And we're going to get the write-up issued, and then when you go to the D-board, let it do what it do, right? Now, normally, when they catch you with a phone, you go into the hole, man. They're going to lock you down. But in this situation, they didn't lock him down. They didn't lock him down at all. But he knew something was funny about the whole situation. So he's in the cell, and he's thinking about everything that just had transpired, and now he's thinking about what Tony told him. He said, Tony, he was thinking out loud, talking to his cellie. He said, Tony told me that they were not coming. He said, but he was trying to push the issue all day to make me believe that it was just talk. So he's starting to think, man, Tony set me up. He got me. He got me. So when the write-up comes, right, Internal Affairs, for whatever reason, is the one that brings the write-up to Chris. And he tells him when he hands him the write-up, he said, look, you don't have to wear this. Chris said, what you talking about? He already knew what he was talking about. He said, you got a choice, man. Here's your choice. Give me some information about how the phone got in here, or you can give me some electronics. And he said, what you mean by that? He said, the ward want all these phones off the compound. They got to go. He said that if you get me another phone to turn in, or one of these watch phones, anything like that, he said, we can make this go away. We'll make it go away. That's what he told him. So Chris said, when do I have to do this? He said, you need to do it within the next couple of days because once I go to the computer and put this is in. So Chris looked at him. He said, man, I'll see what I can do, but I can't really promise nothing. He said, well, then tell me how these phones are getting in. Who's bringing them in? That's just as good. He said, I don't know. I can't even answer that. He didn't want to go that far, even though he did know who the officer was. He didn't want to go that far because he felt like that'd be snitching. But he didn't feel like if he got a phone or some kind of electronic device to turn in, that would be snitching. He felt more comfortable doing that. But he's got to remember now, he's starting to think Tony is against him. Tony ain't straight. That's what he's starting to realize. So he don't tell Tony what kind of deal he's working out. He don't want him to know that what he's getting ready to do. So he goes back to work. Now, let me tell y'all something about when you get caught up in the penitentiary, right? You can have a spotless work record. Spotless. Always doing what you're supposed to do, this, that, and the third, right? And even while you're working and you get close to some of the people that work here, they'll make little comments and say, well, you know, if I was in here, I'd want a phone too, and I would do this and that and all this old kind of stuff like that, right? But then as soon as something like that happens, let me tell you something. They treat you like you are a pariah. They don't want anything to do with you. These same individuals in the work area that were, hey, how you doing this morning? Have a good day and stay positive and all this. Now they're walking past him and they're looking at him weird, mean mugging him like he had done something personally to them. And he's feeling some kind of way. So he goes and he says something to Tony. He said, man, what's going on with everybody? And Tony looks at him and he said, look, man, they don't want people down here that's getting into trouble and doing all this and doing all that. He said, man, this ain't nothing but a penitentiary job, though. He said, yeah, man, but he said, you got to have a certain ethic down here. They expect us to do better, to set the example. Now, keep in mind, let me tell you something. Keep in mind, that Tony is playing a dirty game. He's trying to make Chris feel even more uncomfortable about what's going on. He wants him not to wait until he goes to the D board to get fired. He wants him to quit. He wants him to go to the job coordinator and tell him that he don't feel comfortable working down there anymore. But see, Chris don't do that. He don't do that at all. And he did end up going to see the inmate job coordinator and talk to him. And he told him, he said, look, if you don't get found guilty of anything, you're going to keep your job. Now, Chris is thinking in his head, like, how in the world am I not going to get found guilty? If I don't find something to turn in, it's over. So he went to a friend of his, and he told his friend, somebody that he had known at another prison, what was going on. And the friend said, man, look, I got a phone, and I'll sell it to you for $600, and then you turn that in, because I'm finna get another one anyway, and then we can share that one. That's all Chris needed to hear. He said, when can I get it? He said, when you need it. He said, I need it now. He said, man, you shoot that 6 at me, you can get it right now. So they get on the phone. He called his gal. Chris called his gal, the one he had just started talking to again, tell her what the business was, right? She's willing to do anything to maintain that contact. So she sent him $600. He gives the $600 to his partner. Phone is his. The next morning, he make his way covertly down to the Internal Affairs office. Nobody wants to be seen in the Internal Affairs office. Nobody. But he didn't have no other way to get to him. So he walked by the office and he tapped on the door and he real quick stuck his head and he said, I got it. And the Internal Affairs office said, he said, I'll be down in the unit. He said, hide it in the restroom. I get it. Just let me know where it's at. He said, it's going to be under the sink. I'm going to tape it under the sink. He said, I'll be down there at lunchtime. So Chris gets on down and he leaves. And he goes to tape that phone under the sink. And on like clockwork, the Internal Affairs officer comes through and he scoops the phone. And he leaves. And he winks at Chris, letting him know, I got you. I got you. So the next day, Internal Affairs, he comes down and he tells Chris, don't worry about that. It's over and done. So he said, go check your file. Go tell him to pull you up on the computer and see what your write-up history say. So he goes to talk to his counsel. The counsel pulls it up and he says, you don't have a write-up. Now, he's got other issues to contend with, but he ain't worried about that. He ain't worried about that. He ain't worried about that. So he goes to work, and when he gets to work, Chris is looking at Tony, because Tony has already had somebody check to see, because they expected him to go up to the D board that day. Now all of a sudden he ain't got no write-up. So Tony looking at him all sideways. But see, Chris know how the game go. So he pulled Tony. He pulled Tony into the restroom. He tell him, he said, man, you trying to get rid of me, man. I don't know why. I ain't done nothing to you but be good to you. Now see, Tony, he don't realize, Chris don't realize he dealing with a real psychopath, man. So Tony looked at him, he said, what you talking about? He said, how did they know I had that phone? The only two people that knew I had that phone was me and you. He said, man, I don't know what you're talking about. But he got that look on his face where they staring each other down, they sizing each other up and trying to figure out who's going to make the first move. And if you want to know, you're going to have to tune in to the next episode, right? This has been another episode of Doin Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.
I'm getting so tired.